Devlog 2021, the animation update. So I've done what I was going to do. I have completely reworked the way I think about animation and how I do animation. So the first thing I'll showcase is the new way I deal with entity or mob animations, specifically human this time. And basically I've made a whole bunch of pre-made um, animation blueprints, no animation nodes that are fully in C++. So if I go to, so here they are, like set FPS, blend weapon pose. I'll just go through them one by one, at least here, like not in the code. I'm not going to explain the code. That's just, I will say the code was pretty hard. Oh, I spent, I'll to get to it. So the first thing I'll do is I blend, the first node that gets accessed for human animations is blend weapon pose. So what it does is it takes the weapon pose and it blends it with the locomotion, which is the feet. So if I go to my locomotion file, I go to forward combat walk. So yeah, no wait, yeah, combat walk. So combat walk is you don't have to look into the upper body, only the legs. So the legs are basically, this is basically the locomotion, and the weapon functions, it could be anything. So it could be, for example, MG idle. So this would be the weapon pose. So what blend weapon pose does, it takes the weapon pose and it takes the running pose and it then combines them in a very clever way. So if you know Unreal, you know that there is layered blend per bone, which you could also do this with. However, the problem with layered blend per bone is that it works on local bone space, which causes massive problems when you haven't perfectly like set your rotation values, which often means that your character is looking the wrong direction. Whereas with blend weapon pose, it uses component space, so basically world space between brackets, uh, which makes it so that I can automatically adjust the spine rotation so that the upper spine eventually looks forward. So for every weapon, I can now make it so the spine is different. So for pistol animations, the spine is relatively perpendicular to where you're aiming it, because that's how you aim a pistol. You aim a pistol with your shoulder straight. If you take a rifle, you stand diagonally. And now the spine has changed to diagonal movements. With layer blend per bone, I couldn't do this. I couldn't have different like positions of the spine based on which weapon you're holding. With this blend weapon pose procedural blend, I can now properly adjust the spine so the end rotation of the bone is correct in world space. So it just properly blends that together. So that's what combined with weapon does. Then I get to biped locomotion rotation. What biped locomotion rotation does, it simply makes it so that I procedurally can make strafe animations. So I have not made any strafe animations, but with this blueprint, I can automatically add strafes. So these strafe animations are completely procedurally generated from the normal forward movement walk, which I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Then there is velocity lean. Velocity lean just basically means that the hip bone gets rotated. That's so the character leans into the direction they're running. That's all it does. This is the most basic node, and this was also the first node I made. I even showcased it last month. However, it has been updated. It now rotates the hip bone instead of rotating your root bone, which I couldn't rotate the hip root bone. It caused massive problems. So yeah. Then there are Dragon Spine Solver and Dragon Foot Solver. These are not, so the ones I made have a magenta graphic, whereas these ones have a blue graphic. These Dragon solvers are these are bot code. This is a piece of code that I bought from the Unreal Marketplace. A couple of months ago, I bought these and they were on an extremely steep discount. And I thought, like, maybe these could be useful, and they ended up being useful. So what Dragon, okay, Spine and Legs does is it makes it so that it automatically adjusts the foot location based on height. So if I yeah, so I still have a bit of problems with the foot rotations. I have to fix that. Oh god. That's because I'm aiming straight down. So this leg IK movement is done by via that animation node, the one that I bought. So that's all that it does. It basically makes it so that the feet are making proper contact with the ground. That's all that it is used for. Then if I go continue upwards on the down on the chain, I go to IK arms fix. So what IK arms fix does is it's basically just it handles looking up and down with a weapon. So that's all that it does. It actually okay. I'll have to adjust the pistol one. It looks better with a rifle. So I can now properly aim up and my arms properly stay connected to the weapon. With the old system I had with animation blending, during looking up and down, the supporting hand, so in this case the left hand, would desync from the weapon. So it would basically it would slowly go towards the character if you were aiming up. So it would look pretty bad. Also for aiming down. Oh, I just froze my rendering. That's fine. Also with aiming down again, the weapon, the hands stay properly on the weapon. Now it doesn't really shoulder the stock properly, but the problem is I can't. So the way you would normally aim a weapon, if you were aiming down, you would actually turn your entire spine forward. I can't do that because when I look down, I have to see my lower body, and if I were to just, I gotta sneeze. God damn it. All right, we're alive. I gotta sneeze again. Please. Yes? Maybe? Please? Okay, I think I'm fine. Um, um, the reason why I can't so the way you would normally aim a weapon is you would actually bend your entire spine because you want your connection points between your shoulder, arms, and head to stay properly to basically maintain the correct offset with each other. I can't do that in a game because it would involve moving the camera, and I don't want to move the camera away from the center of rotation. Otherwise, it would make moving really weird. Just I'm not gonna explain it. It would take too long. But the point is the camera of the character needs to stay in the center of the character in order to have good rotation. Ugh. Okay, moving on. So that's that one. Two bone IK basically that's just for extra. It just makes absolutely sure that the hands stay in the correct position. That's all that two bone IK does. These are so yellow means that uh they're Unreal animation nodes. So the purple ones are mine, the blue ones are for Unreal, and the blue ones are from the pack that I bought. Then there is Dragon Aim Look Solver. That just handles looking for head rotations. So for the player, you're basically just looking towards where the camera is looking. For enemies and AI, they're looking towards whoever their target may be. So enemies will now actually properly look at you. I'll showcase that later. Another great thing about the new animation system is it now uses fully C++. So on the anim nodes, you see this lightning strike, which means fast path enabled. This lightning strike basically means that no blueprint functions are being called. So if all of your functions have this lightning strike, it basically means it's not making any calls towards the blueprint, so it's basically fully running on C++. This is also the reason why animation nodes are split into two classes, a C++ class and a blueprint class. The blueprint class is basically the visual representation that you see in your animation blueprint. And the C++ class that this is calling is what's underneath the hood, which is basically very efficient, very fast, very performance friendly. So yeah, that's that basically. What's next? Okay, I guess I'll showcase them real quick. So I'll get a entity trooper. Let's get a pistol one. So here's the animations in action. The AI obviously uses the same animations as the player, because why would I make two different animation sets? Would make sense. So it looks way better than it was before. Firstly, because they actually now strafe with their legs instead of rotating their entire spine into the direction they're walking. So that looks way more natural. Gonna take some distance so the sound doesn't drown out. Another thing that helps is the velocity lean. So the fact that they're slightly leaning into the direction they're walking also really helps with making them feel more believable. And of course their legs are making proper contact with the ground with the IK solver. With the Dragon IK solver. So yeah, that looks way better. I've also decreased the movement speed of enemies, so fighting enemies is now a lot less tedious. Enemies used to run at 6 meters per second. The slowest enemies now run at 3 meters per second. At least the human enemies, which makes them way better, way more fun to fight. It also means that they can have better animation. So because the faster your character is moving, basically the more unrealistic your movements will be, especially while strafing, because I mean, in real life, it's pretty difficult to strafe 6 meters per second while also shooting a weapon. That looks kind of silly. So it looks more natural. Obviously, for the player, it's still... I actually can't showcase this because third-person camera is broken. That thing is broken. So yeah. Okay, so that's the human animation. I've also made one animation set for the demon characters. I've not yet done the other ones because I spent half the month working on animation, half the month working on other stuff, which I'll show later. But I have made one non-human and an enemy, given it a new animation set, just to see if the animations work. So if I go to animations. So again, this has the pretty much the exact same setup as the player character. There's an IK arm fixed. It's all the same basically. So every character can use the exact same character, and this is very fast to set up. I just have to plug these nodes in, connect them, give them the proper variables, and it's done. It works. So this will massively speed up making any animation blueprint for characters. So these guys are pretty fast, but they have a slow acceleration, which makes up for it. That throwing animation looks pretty rough right now, and that's one of the animations I need to rework. But it's something I quickly made. There they also have a jumping animation. Oh my god, direct hit. What a god. So here we have jumping animations for him, which looks pretty great. I mean, it's not a jumping animation, it's basically just a falling animation, and it checks what it procedurally decides how it's going to look like based on the velocity. That's really it. I need to be careful because I've now added an on fire effect, but that on fire effect rarely crashes the game because right now the way I delete the effect when it's done is very unsafe. Talk about it later. I mean, I think... Oh, and he's constantly looking at me. Even when he's jumping, he's still looking at me. So he's properly tracking you. Which I think adds a lot to the realism and believability of the enemy characters. The fact that they're now actually properly looking at you. He now also has proper strafe animations. previously most melee enemies only had a forward running animation, which means that they would look really awkward when they turn the corner, because they basically turn the corner while still walking forward, which basically means they were awkwardly floating above the ground, basically. But yeah, that's that. I guess I'll quickly talk about status effects. So I have reworked the way status effects work. I mean, I've never really had any status effects code. So in here, no, that's save status interface. Save status effect. There we go. So here I have my status effects. So status effects are basically saved in a struct, not a class. And I can basically have an array of status effects inside of the pawn. So in the pawn, character has a as an array of status effects, and I can basically just add this to the status effects. And when the status effects has at least one status effect, there is a ticking status effect timer. I'm saying status effect a lot. There's a timer, and it basically ticks, and that basically handles all of the status effects. So I currently have a bunch of status effects. So SE none. So the reason why I have no status effect is basically sometimes I have to give a status effect. So SE none basically means there's no status effect. I have a vision stun. I have a movement control stun. I have a disable air control stun. So that disable air control stun is actually used for jump pads. So during the first few seconds of the jump pad, I can't control myself. So I can't do any control while in the air. The reason why I've added that is because I don't want people to run into the jump pad while holding W. Because previously, if you were to run into a jump pad while holding W, you would instantly stop. So I'm still holding W, and there. You would come to a dead stop, and it would basically means that the jump would often be not accurate. So this basically makes sure that it gives the player enough time to let go of their movement keys, so the end point of the air jump is correct. Another place where air control is used is by certain enemy attacks. So the Minotaur Stomp, which is currently non-functional because, again, the Restoring Warrior is the only entity that currently has a proper animation set. But the Minotaur Stomp, for example, also has air control stun. Because this uses source movement, you can always instantly stop that in the air. While that is great for like strafe movement, and it's something that's also needed in order to make strafe movement work properly, it also means that you could very easily escape knockback. And that's obviously something I don't want. So for attacks that would cause knockback, I would create this air control stun that would basically prevent the player from having air control. So if you were to get knocked back by an enemy, then I want to make it so you can't just like control instantly. Obviously, after a second or so, air control would come back. So if you were to get like knocked back by a Minotaur, for the first second you would be at the mercy of that knockback, but after that second you could regain your air control and try and steer away from wherever you're going. So you could like damage surf and stuff. That's great. Another effect is on fire and disabled gravity. Okay, I'll showcase on fire. So I'm just gonna get pistols again since they do low damage. God, I killed him. So they're on fire. Okay. I need to be really careful with it because the way it works right now, it's pretty bad actually. So if I go to effect start, so go to definition. The way it works is I load a Niagara system, so character on fire effects, which is an effects I've made myself that basically projects fire particles out of the mesh. And then when it's done, I basically try and find that particle with the name I've given it. So I've given it a specific name, which would be on fire effect plus the name of the character, so I don't get duplicate component names. And then I just delete it here. So unregistered component, destroy component. However, this is an unsafe way of getting rid of Niagara particles. And there is a very, very small chance that if I guess a frame perfect thing happens, the game crashes. So I need to add a safer way to delete the fire effect. So that's why I will basically stop the simulation the moment fire effects stop, because otherwise there's a very small chance it crashes the game. Another thing is anti-gravity. Okay. Which I guess I'll use the warrior for. So the reason why I shoot every time when I get back into the game is because I have to left click to gain control of my character, which also fires the gun. This is the new... Oh, okay. Anti-gravity mine first. So the anti-gravity mine will basically lock enemies stuck into anti-gravity. That's all that it does. And then you can... Which actually has fun synergies with like precision weapons. So what you could do is you could... What you do is you could launch him in the air. Okay, I'm not sure why he's doing that. Come here. So you could launch him in the air and then kill him with it. Simple as that. Yeah. I guess I'll quickly talk about the new weapon models. So I've made a whole bunch of new weapon models. First off, the pistol was probably one of the worst models. So I haven't made a new pistol model, which looks way better. I've also gotten a new workflow on hard surface models. That's just... I've spent some time improving my hard model surface modeling skills, so that looks way better. Yeah. Brownie points if you know which pistol it is. Yeah, so this also has a small model update. The weapons now actually use an actual real world cartridge. So previously, weapons would use the fictional 427 cartridge. I've now made it so that they use 762 the Russian cartridge, the Komi cartridge. Which there is probably something incredibly heretical about having an AR-15 with communist cartridges, but whatever. So I did a few model updates. First of all, the magazine is slightly changed to fit the new cartridge. I think this is slightly longer. Biggest change is I've added some pads to the weapon stock, so that now looks way better. And I've also added proper fire controls. I'm not gonna go into detail about nerdy weapon stuff. This is the double barrel shotgun. The double barrel shotgun has been completely reworked. It's now an over-under shotgun. And instead of... Oh shit, he's still here. Sometimes his skeletal animation doesn't go into ragdoll, I don't know why. Previously, the two fire modes of the double barrel shotgun was you could choose to fire single shot or fire both barrels at once. But firing both barrels at once is kind of boring. So I basically came up with the anti-gravity mine. So where the idea of the anti-gravity mine came from is basically from skeet shooting. You know, where you have the clay pigeons and you shoot with the shotgun the clay pigeons. That's basically the idea behind the gravity mine, is you can basically knock things up the air and just like shooting, you can shoot stuff while it's in the air. And that's basically the whole idea behind the anti-gravity mine. And the reason why it's an anti-gravity mine and not just an upward force is... I think for most people, knocking something up in the air, the fact that they're still... like, the whole point of the anti-gravity mine is that you make it easier for something to shoot. Whereas, however, if I were to just knock it high in the air, it's counterintuitive. Like, you want something to be stable so you can walk up and shoot it. Whereas if I were to knock it up in the air, I would literally counteract the usefulness of a shotgun, because the enemy would basically get knocked away, and my shotgun would get less effective. So you would basically have an alternative fire mode that would make your shotgun less effective. So that's why they basically get stuck in the air instead of just like being bounced up like a clay pigeon. Because you want to make it easy to shoot. Again, gotta be careful with the fire particles, they could crash the game. Also, I got a new sword model. So I also made a new sword model. It's a lot longer, so it makes more sense for the enemies to have a very long melee hitbox. All melee enemies have a relatively long weapon hitbox because the movement speed is so high for the player character. If they had short melee ranges, the enemies, they would basically never hit the player. Also, look at how happy he is with his fiery sword. I got a song stuck in my head. Fiery sword. Rider with a fiery... Megadeth. Blessed of the Dead. Whatever. Not important. Sometimes I just hear lines from a song and I'm just instantly thinking of the song. Great fiery sword. Yes. He's obviously not textured. That should be obvious. But yeah. That's stuff that I'm gonna do this month. Like getting all the enemies working again is something I need to do this month, which I need to do something specific with. Oh, I forgot to talk about something. So multiple times during when I was explaining the animations, I said that I was going to show something. I was going to show this. So this right here is a lag, obviously. So what I had to do was I had to actually figure out how inverse kinematics works. Not just from a conceptual thing, but literally how to program inverse kinematics. So this right here is a test setup for inverse kinematics. I currently still have not gotten inverse kinematics working. I mean, I got it working. Like here, I have a fabric inverse kinematics setup, which does work. I now know how fabric inverse kinematics works, and it's actually great. So the best, most efficient inverse kinematics algorithm is fabric. And it's also the most easy to understand, which is amazing. Usually the most efficient code is not always the most understandable. But when it comes to inverse kinematics, the most understandable inverse kinematics code is actually the ones that I can understand. Because the other inverse kinematics algorithms, I don't have a fucking clue. Mostly because there just are no good there are no good, come on, brain, good documentation on how it is. Whatever. So the way inverse kinematics here works is the first thing I do is I'll make sure that the lag is in the most optimal rotation while taking the effector and the pull target into consideration. So that is the pull target where the lag is supposed to point, and that is the effector target where the foot is supposed to be. Now that is currently not working. I could get it working, but it looks really weird. The current problem that I have is I need to figure out how to incorporate angle limits with Fabric IK. So I've gotten Fabric IK on its own working, but I need to know how to make Fabric IK work with angle limits. Which means I had to learn how quaternions work. Because you can't use Euler. You cannot use Euler rotations for inverse kinematics. Because you're gonna run into gimbal lock. Gimbal lock is something I had massive problems with in the first like concepts of the. So pretty much every rotation I now do in the game, I do in quaternions because I've learned the magic of quarter. I'm going too fast. I need to explain the problem. So, okay, am I actually going to explain this? No, I'm not because this is way outside the scope of the video. The point is, they're in brain. Okay, we start at the beginning. The first problem is the human. So the way we think humans about rotations is with degrees, with 3 degrees. So we have yaw, pitch, and then we have roll. I can't roll my character, but those are the 3 types of rotation. The problem is that if I were to look up and I were to now look right, I'm now rolling my character, but not really because I am actually uh I'm adding a yaw rotation, not a roll rotation, but it looks like I'm rolling. The problem is gimbal lock. I am now gimbal locked. My roll rotation and my yaw rotation are now on the same axis. So I have now initiated a gimbal lock. So I now lost one of my rotations. This basically means that bad shit happens. And I had this bad gimbal lock shit happen all the time during the making of these procedural animations. So I basically had to fully switch to quarter nines. And the way quarter nines work is quarter nines, first of all, they use radians instead of degrees. And they use 4 dimensions. So you basically use 4 dimensions um, to explain rotation in 3 dimensions. And with that fourth dimension, you basically remove the possibility of gimbal lock. The second great thing about Quaternions, so the reason why Quaternions are fucking amazing instead of Euler rotations isn't even because of gimbal lock. Gimbal lock isn't even the most important thing that Quaternions fix. The greatest thing about Quaternions is that you can very, very easily display local and world rotations. So with quarter nines, no matter where you're pointing, it's very easy to add a right vector or a left vector or an up vector or a down vector. If you know the forward rotation of a quarter nine, it is extremely easy to know what the up vector is or what the left vector is or the back vector or the down vector. You can very easily translate that and also very efficient. Good luck doing that with Euler rotations. You're not going to do that with Euler rotations. You first would, in order to figure out a up factor of an Euler rotation, you usually first have to create a neutral rotation, add rotation, and add rotation back. Big disaster. Don't do it. So yeah, that's just a little bit about complex rotation math. Great. Um, so yeah, new weapon models. I showed the new weapon models. New weapon animation. I've also made new weapon animations for each because again, I'm no longer locked to the spine being in a specific orientation. I can now choose a different spine orientation for every weapon. So rifles can have a proper diagonal position. Pistols can have just their shoulders straight, etc., etc., etc. I'm no longer locked to specific spine rotations. So I reworked every single weapon. So I mean, this bit. Commando rifle. Shotgun. Again, you can see that my third person model. Oh, I didn't explain that. Whatever. Let's just say my third person model is using the first person weapon model, and then with like procedural animation magic, I can transfer my first person weapon character. Okay, I'll explain it a little bit. So the way it works is, I'll go to this. So my characters consist of 2 skeletal meshes, a third person model and a first person model. Both of these have separate blueprints. What I'm doing is I'm taking my first person model animations, I'm saving them into a data struct, and I'm then transporting that data struct to the third person model. And that third person model then procedurally generates a third person animation. It is absolutely genius the way it works, and that's all I'm gonna say. Um, yeah, this is a new double barrel shotgun. The problem with the new double barrel shotgun is that the animations are just unfinished. That reload animation looks extremely floaty, and it needs to be reworked. So yeah. So with the plasma rifle, I've actually removed the scope. It's still on the model. I've just made it so that it can be removed. Um, because the scope model was getting in the way of the crosshair. And the reason why that's happening is because the animation holds the weapon very high up, because obviously you want to hold the rifle very high up to your face so you can actually look down the sights, which funny enough there are no sights now. But the downside of this, because you're holding your weapon very high, the sights is actually blocking the vision. So yeah, I had to remove the scope, which is fine. It still shows up on the third person body model. Oh, I need to explain that. So yeah, the last held weapon. If you switch your weapon, your last held weapon will actually show up on your body. So some weapons will show up in front. So like if it's like slung in front of you, and some weapons show up. So like long weapons show up on your back. So for example, the grenade launcher. No. The flamethrower will show up on your back if you switch away from it. So there it is. Those on your back, and the machine gun will show in the front. So that's just a fun little detail. So if you look down, you can see your last held weapon. The hunting rifle will show on your back. The rocket launcher and the sword currently have no animations. Another thing, I improved the artillery animation. The artillery animation previously went up, and it actually blocked the crosshair with your hands, but that no longer happens. So, yeah. So another thing is I've also bought a sound pack. So I bought 2 sound packs for €3 each on the Unreal marketplace sale. So all of these reload animations are from a professionally made sound pack. So I bought 2 sound packs. These sounds are from SFX of Weapons, which is amazing. This is an amazing pack. Those are just a few. I'm not gonna play them all, because otherwise someone could just rip them off this video. And another weapon is a real science fiction weapons. This pack is actually pretty bad. It's amateur hour. These sounds, it was said that there was going to be a ton of sounds. I was like, oh wow, there are so many sounds. The reality is they offer kind of light, and most of the sounds are basically just variations with reverb. And they are extremely bad. They are very flat, and they have pretty much 0 punch to them. So yeah, this weapon pack is pretty bad. However, there are a few miscellaneous weapon sounds that are actually useful. There are a few useful sounds in here. Most of the sounds are absolute amateur hour, badly made, but there are a handful of them that are useful, and I've used a few of them, so it's not a complete loss, thankfully. And it was only €3, so I'm not gonna cry about that. That's a handful of candy bars. What are you gonna do? Eat a handful of candy bars or get a fucking sound pack you can use for the rest of your life? Who cares? If it was a €10 pack, yeah, I would have been fucking mad. Unfortunately, SFX of Weapon. So most of the sounds from SFX of Weapon are rifle sounds. I'm actually pretty sure it's for the most part Russian weapons because it sounds a lot like AKs. Because AKs have a very have a very big sound when you charge the handle. So they unfortunately don't have any shotgun sounds. So the most shotgun sounding sounds I found was this one, which doesn't sound like a shotgun. It's more of a rifle sound. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna export this sound effects to Reaper, and I'm gonna see if I can fatten it up and make it a bit more beefier so it's actually a shotgun sound. But that's something I'm gonna do later. So yeah. So yeah, the only bad thing I have to say about the SFX of Weapon Pack is that it's mostly rifle sounds. It has a handful of pistol sounds, and it has pretty much no shotgun sounds. So yeah, that's the only critique of SFX of weapons. What else? So weapon models, weapon sound effects. Yeah. Weapon code rewrite. Yeah, so I rewritten most of the codes related to weapons because last time I tried to showcase how easy it was to set up new weapons and it's actually backfired and I couldn't get something working. So if I now go to let's go to anything, just there. So what I now have is I now have a struct with all of the weapon stats, and I can very easily duplicate that to the secondary weapon fire, so I can very easily switch between primary and secondary fire. I had a ton of duplicate code in my weapon, in my weapon codes that is now all just condensed into one function and just have a boolean that decides whether I should use primary weapon sets or secondary weapon sets, and that's it. Like, it's very easy. It's also now a lot easier to fill in the stats because previously I had to click on every individual stats, and now I can just click on the struct and then go to the right details tab and you just very easily and quickly fill stuff in. So yeah, weapons are now much better programmed. Big improvement. Very nice. Okay, yeah. So I got also a bunch of new weapon effects. So I wanted to improve some of the weapons. So which I could only do by adding some additional code. So projectiles have now been expanded that they can now fire cluster ammunitions. So yeah. So if I go to my projectile, so here I have my, it's called Merv in the code. So Merv upward spray is what the grenades are using. So that basically sprays my clusters upward, and I have a downward spray which sprays the clusters downward, so you could like aim up and then downwards. But I've not yet come up with a weapon that would use that. Then I have Merv forward cone. That's probably something I'm gonna use for some enemy projectiles. So projectiles can split into multiple projectiles, but they maintain the velocity and they maintain the direction. So it's basically just a scatter shot. Then I have forward cone, no vertical spread. So that basically means there's no vertical spread. So there's only a horizontal spread when the projectile splits. And then there is a full 360, which is basically full shrapnel. So there's a full 360 of projectiles. That's basically it. The reason why I've added this is that, so the way grenades usually works is, so grenades do 40 impact damage and 60 blast damage. So if you hit an enemy dead on with the grenade, you do a 100 damage. The way remote detonation used to work is remote detonation used to basically make it so that the blast damage was up to 100. So if you were to detonate a grenade with the detonator, the blast damage would go up from 60 to 100. This was stupid because there was not really any feedback that the grenades were dealing more blast damage. And it was also kind of boring. So it's basically the same explosion, but it now does 100 damage instead of 60 blast damage, which is just. So now if you remote detonate your grenades, it fires a cluster bomb, and it's pretty devastating. It's probably going to be extremely devastating in indoor environments. Outdoors, the cluster grenades spread out a lot, so the damage gets spread out as well. I do need to get at a. So here's a problem. You notice how the last grenades didn't have any explosion sound effects bound to them. The reason for that is that you can only have so many sound effects going at the same time, and after that, it basically cancels any other sound effects you try to call. So I really need to find a sound pack with a whole bunch of explosive sounds. Let's see if I can find a very short explosion sound that I can use for the cluster bombs. So with a short sound effects, uh the the sound space that it takes up very quickly also gets freed up again for other explosions. So I need to find a bunch of other explosion sound effects. Pretty much every explosion currently that's in the game uses the exact same explosion sound effect. So yeah, that's really something I need to diversify. Another thing that I wanted to change is um the grenades for the commando rifle. The commando rifle used to just fire the exact same grenades as the 40mm grenade launcher. So these used to be the exact same projectile. Which is kind of stupid because that basically means you have two weapons that fire the same projectile. Which makes no sense. So I've decided to add a laser mine. So any Half-Life fan, rejoice. We now have laser mines. So they're currently just using the grenade model. I need to make a custom mine model, obviously. But these use the new mine code. So if I go to my code, I now have so in damage sources, I now have SK mine, and I have two types of mines. I have proximity mines and I have laser mines. This is a laser mine, obviously. But the anti-gravity grenade, the anti-gravity mines of the hunter shotgun uses proximity. So yeah, and if you walk over it, it explodes after a very short duration. It automatically adjusts how far the laser goes. So if the laser gets cut off by an object, it obviously would. Also, that mine beep is one of the few useful sounds I got from that shitty sound pack. So yeah. The AI will just run into them, and I'm also not gonna make any code for the AI to avoid them. I think it's kind of always a discussion of when is AI too good. Like anyone can make AI that like avoids mines, but the problem is if you make AI that avoids mines, then what's the point of having mines? So yeah, so what you can do is you can shoot a mine, you can slide under the mine, and then any enemy that's chasing you will just stupidly run into it. So yeah, but like AI needs to some extent, AI needs to remain dumb, because if you make AI too good at avoiding stuff, it's actually very annoying. I actually remember playing Half-Life 1 and being extremely annoyed that that grunts run away from grenades. Like grenades in Half-Life would be a very effective way to kill a very annoying enemy. But the problem is you can't kill grunts with grenades in Half-Life, because if you throw a grenade at a grunt in Half-Life, they will run away from it. They will avoid the grenade, which is just that's just making the AI too smart. Like the AI should be smart. So AI should be smart, but it also shouldn't be too smart so they're annoying. So if the AI were to avoid mines, then there is no reason to use mines. Same with grenades. If you make it so the AI actually avoids grenades, then what's the point of using grenades? Like grenades are in Half-Life 1 are only useful against enemies that don't run away from them. I can't actually know. I know grenades in Half-Life 1 are pretty shit because they bounce a lot and enemies run away from them. So it's just like So, but if I just quickly get a new enemy again. So an example of good AI so is making the AI strafe. So if I get close, the AI actually starts strafing. This is an example of good, like, advanced AI. That the AI is actually trying to avoid you. That the AI is not just like standing there like a bag of salt, and also that the AI isn't just idiotically running towards you. But the fact that the AI is trying to strafe and constantly changing its position. That's a good example of like AI being smart without being annoying. So an enemy is running away from grenades. That's AI being smart, while also AI being annoying. AI strafing, trying to like make themselves a bit of a harder target. That is good AI, but it's also not that annoying, because if the AI were to just stand still, it would be way too easy to kill them. Like, it's not hard to hit them. But yeah, that's a quick discussion on whether or not AI should be too smart. So yeah. Cluster. Oh yeah, so AoE effects. So I now also have AoE effects. So that's on the flamethrower. How many you will run into it? And then I have to stop it. So yeah. So if I go to my AoE code, so again, that's another damage source. So I have mines as a damage source, but I also have area of effect hazards as a damage source. So I can basically choose what type of hazard it is. So whether it's an AoE sphere, whether it's a box, whether it's a capsule, whether it's a cylinder, or if it's just a line trace. Line trace is currently not present in the code, but the others are. So funnily enough, cylinders are actually very difficult to do because there are no. So if I go to my code, so right here in ask area ASK, so that means actor SK area effect hazard in tick damage. So it depends on the AoE type. Some AoE types just have, I can fill it in here. So damage tick rate. So that's how often the damage ticks. So what I do is in area effect tick damage, I basically just make a overlap box, and I basically just check which entities are currently overlapping the box. So for boxes, capsules, and spheres, it's really easy. I just need to make a basic collision shape that's a box, make a basic collision shape that's a capsule, make a basic collision shape that's a sphere. Easy. However, there's one problem. For some godforsaken reason, there is Unreal does not have a cylinder collision, which is extremely annoying because cylinder collision is one of those collision types you actually really want. Apparently, this is because it uses NVIDIA PhysX. Apparently, it's because of NVIDIA PhysX. PhysX apparently doesn't have a cylinder collider, so that's why Unreal doesn't have a cylinder collider. So there you go, AMD fanboys. If you have want another reason to shit on AMD, there it is. NVIDIA PhysX has no cylinder collision. I just deleted something. So the way I can make a cylinder, so if I just open Blender real quick, I can just show it. So the way I do cylinder collision, I basically do a capsule collision and a box collision, and I just see if both of those are reported the same actor, that means that it's a cylinder collision. I'll showcase it in Blender real quick. Okay, so there are actually no capsules in. So yeah, UV sphere, then quickly make this into a capsule. There. So this is basically what it would look like in the overlap. So So what it would do is no. Yeah. This is basically what it would look like in the game code. So it would do a capsule collider, and then it would also do a box collider, and it would basically check if the entity is both inside the capsule collider and inside the box collider. If it's both inside of the because if I were to add both of these together and in an AND struct, in an AND logic, I would create a cylinder. So I would basically cut off the tops, and I would also cut off the extra stuff that's in here, and I would basically end up with a cylinder. And that's how I do this. I just make a capsule, I make a box, I both check for overlaps, and then I just check if they're both have the same actor, and if they both have the same actor, that means that there is a cylinder collision. That's how I can make cylinder AoE effects. Very nice. So yeah, that's just a little hack I had to do because, again, NVIDIA PhysX has no cylinders.